Dan. Shalom.
Kathy.
Dwayne. Hey, shalom, fam. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Give me one moment here. Okay. I'm going to do one last thing, and then I'm going to get started. I pray you all been having a blessed Shabbat. All right, so if you guys got the link, what you'll be able to see is the books we're going to be using. It's going to be a pretty intense lesson. We're going to use Matthew, 1st Maccabees, and then Josephus, book 12, chapter 1 and chapter 5, possibly 6, but I don't want to go do too much. Okay, I don't want to dig in too deep. But that's going to be the scripture reading and lesson we're going to break down. Those of you that are should be now getting acclimated to how I study, how I actually go about gaining a balanced understanding of the scripture, and also going into details that were left out, in some cases on purpose. In other cases, it's something where this information has been overlooked. So we're dealing with the book of Matthew, starting in chapter 2. And then we're going to be beginning in Josephus, book 12, and then jumping right into 1st Maccabees. My goal was and is to, over the course of the next few weeks, dig into the Maccabean period, because most Israelites don't know about the Maccabean period. They just really, there's a large gap of information and time that our people just do not know anything about. They know some small things about that time period without actually knowing they do. For instance, the Maccabean period, when you're dealing with topics such as Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Cleopatra, that is the time period of the Maccabees. When you're dealing with Alexander the Greek, or some say Alexander the Great, that's a time period we're dealing with. We're dealing with a period of time that most of our people that have been brought up in Christianity, even Islam, don't know about. And truth be told, most Israelites that have awakened to this truth, they got their Bible on lock, they got their Apocrypha, have not yet still read Maccabees. So it's not enough to have the Apocrypha. It's not enough to have Josephus. You actually have to dig in and read it and dig in and get some of this meat out. The challenge, though, to be fair, is that most people don't know where to go or where to look in these works. Do you guys believe that's a fair statement to say that most people don't even know where to look or go in these books?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is fair to say.
All right, so my job as your Moreh is to help you through this process. I want to empower you to learn about this information so that you're more educated and knowledgeable about some of these topics and subjects. There's so much wealth of information on this I really want to get into, but I just know that I won't be able to do it all in one shot, even though I want to. For instance, let's see, how many of you know about the Septuagint or knew of it before I had mentioned it to you? How many of you knew about the existence of the Septuagint?
I did.
Okay.
I did.
How many of you knew how it came about? How many of you know the story about how the Septuagint came about?
I read a little bit about it. far as
I've heard a story about it, but I'm not entirely sure if it was accurate.
All right, so there is a work called the Letter of Aristeas that documents the creation of the Septuagint. And we all know the Septuagint is literally, it's like, I mean, up to this point in time, there's nothing that is older than that. Okay? It's the root of most all manuscripts, meaning what you're dealing with is you're looking at, there's basically a mystical copy of the Hebrew Bible. We don't know where it's at. It's probably in the Vatican somewhere, but there's this mystical Hebrew Bible that was literally the foundation or basis of the Septuagint among many other early manuscripts, okay? Everything else came after that. And so oftentimes when you're digging in the script, like I tell you all, if you're looking for doctrinal understanding, meaning you're trying to gain a doctrinal understanding of Torah, if you're not in the Septuagint, you're wrong. Period. You can beat on the Aramaic and you're Mr. Hebrew Aramaic all day long. You're done, because the Septuagint is the foundation. Okay, period. There's no argument. Even though they don't even like the Septuagint, cannot even argue that. All right. So in the book 12 of Josephus, Antiquities of the Hebrews, chapter 2, it actually condenses down the story of the letter of Aristeas, or the history of the making of the Septuagint is also documented in Josephus. Okay, so again, this is not some new school thing. Josephus, the first century historian, actually had insight from first century, all right, into how the Septuagint was created. And so during that time period, the Septuagint was very similar to the King James we have today, but in the Greek world. All right. And so the Septuagint was literally, it was created 300 years before Mashiach. And so that goes into something that we're going to address right now when we go into chapter 2 of Matthew. I'm setting this up as a foundation, okay? So I'm going to pray real quick, and then we'll just do a quick roll call just to kind of break the ice and just tell everybody your name and what city you're in. But let me pray real quick. Abba Yah, thank you for the time that we have in your presence to come together this night, this Shabbat night, to go over a powerful reading of our history, our culture, our heritage that has been denied us for so many years. I pray that you illuminate the words that come off these pages, and that I speak, and that those that are also speaking these chapters out, I pray that we're all edified, and that you will be magnified and glorified in us being obedient to you and your word, for fellowship and assemble one to another. I pray this all in the name of your Son, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen, amen, and hallelujah.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Amen.
Okay, real quick, just do a quick roll call, just in any order, just fine. Just state your name and what city you're in.
Myra, Portland.
Hadassah for Houston. Cipriana, Phoenix.
Yvonne, Phoenix.
Kathy,
Dan,
Cottonwood.
Hi, Mom. Shout out to the Phoenix fam.
Brandon in Phoenix. Shalom, fam.
And Bakar in Phoenix. Can y'all hear me?
Praise God, praise God. Yeah, you're a little bit low, but we can hear you.
Okay. I got these headphones in. I was trying to see if I can hear. Oh, I got a question real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question real quick.
Go ahead.
The letters of Aristeas.
Yeah, fine.
Speak about. Is that what you were saying? Speak about the the coming together of the Septuagint.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah, I got that. I'm gonna read that later on.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. I mean, I don't know why they want to call it a letter. I mean, it's really a chronicle of what took place. And that man, Aristeas, he was all right.
Yeah.
I literally
that.
To big up on Aristeas, he was a Gentile that had love and respect for Israel, for the Yahudi, and he was about our people. Real talk.
Yeah, I'm gonna dig into this later.
Yeah, he was one of the Gentiles that were moved upon by the Most High to do right by us. And so big ups to Aristeas when you look at and actually everyone that was involved to bring about that. It's something that I want to get into, but not tonight, simply because for time's sake. But the letter of Aristeas, and specifically the account that Josephus gives, is fantastic because he breaks down literally what's going to end up happening to us here in the diaspora, where there's going to be this powerful move of the Most High, where the laws turn towards our favor. And so those of you that were with me in Phoenix, and I told you about what happened where the Most High had visited me that night. And had brought out about the laws, and I'm telling you, that was the strangest statement for me to try to understand, like, what do you mean by that? I'm trying to wrap my mind around, a changing of laws and so on and so forth. But when you look at it in light of what took place during that period, what you have is literally Israel coming in favor of those in power, where the captives were set free and folks came off their pocketbook to redeem us, take care of us, to recompense for what took place. Because again, the atrocities that we've gone through in modern times have been cyclical. Sadly, it really, I can really break down and cry right now when I really think about the different things that our people have gone through cyclically. And we're going to go into some of this a little bit, but real talk, this has been a cycle that we've gone through, and it's time to break that cycle. All right. And so also what we're dealing with this day is we're also dealing with, we're in that season for the Feast of Dedication. Some of the assemblies are actually doing something today, beginning today. Others will be doing it later on in the month. We already know, we're not hung up on dates, because just as much as I could talk about, let's say the full moon being the new moon, I could go and show the first visible crescent as being the beginning of the month or the new moon. And so we don't get hung up on that. The biggest and most important thing is that we all are observing the different feast days. And for those of you that want to jump ahead, because we will not be able to get there tonight, you can jump ahead to 1 Maccabees Chapter 4 to get insight into why we actually celebrate 8 days of the Feast of Dedication. You can find that in 1 Maccabees as well as 2 Maccabees. All right. So right now we're setting the foundation. We'll get there eventually because we have time. But those, like I said, those of you that want to hurry up and rush on through, you can go to First Maccabees Chapter 4, you will find the reason why we celebrate the Feast of Dedication there, which others call Hanukkah. And, we'll go from there. So, but what I would like to do at this point in time, are there any other questions before we get started with Matthew Chapter 2? And I would like a reader for Matthew Chapter 2, please. All right? But any questions or statements before we begin?
Shalom.
Okay. Shalom. Okay. Can I get a reader for Matthew Chapter 2, please? It doesn't matter what translation you're reading. Just announce what it is and just be a strong reader, and we'll go from there.
Okay, I'll read for you. Matthew chapter 2. Now when Yahusha had been born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men arrived from the east to Jerusalem, saying...
Stop right there. Stop right there for a second. All right.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm going to stop here now and then, okay? So just kind of be prepared for that.
Okay.
Take notes. We're not just chilling on the phone. Take notes. So my question for you all, what you all should be asking is, who potentially, because we don't know necessarily for sure, who potentially could be these wise men from the east of Jerusalem? So that's a question you should write down and ask yourself. All right, I'll continue, please.
Saying,
Verse 2.
Where is he born king of the Yahudim? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. But Herod the king, having heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And having gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he asked of them where the Mashiach was to be born. And they said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet.
Stop right there.
And you...
All right. So, next question is, who is this Herod? Who is this Herod? Write that down. And also, let's think about the fact that in light of who this Herod is, as a king, who made him king? How was he appointed king?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see what he did. Now, in the KJV, it says he demanded of them where the Mashiach should be born. And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. So my question for you, which prophet is he talking about? All right, continue, please.
And this is, we'll just start at verse 6. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, in no way are you least among the governors of Judah. For out of you shall come a governor, who shall shepherd my people Israel. Then secretly calling wise men, Herod asked of them exactly the time of the star appearing. And sending them to Bethlehem, he said, going, search carefully for the child. And when you find him, bring the word again, so that coming I may also worship him.
Mm-hmm.
And having heard the king, they departed. And behold, the star which they saw in the east went before them until it had come and stood over where the child was. And seeing the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with a great joy. And having come into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary. And falling down, they worshipped him. And opening their treasures, they presented gifts to him, gold and frankincense and myrrh.
Stop right there. How old was Yeshua? Was he a baby or was he a young child?
A young child.
So make note of that. He was a young child. He was not a baby. So when you have the nativity out there and they got 3 wise men, okay, it doesn't say how many of these wise men were. It just says the wise men from the east of Jerusalem. And it's not a baby Yeshua. It says 2 times, verse 9, and stood over where the young child was. Verse 11, and when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother. So I just want to just clear that up for some that may not have recognized that. He was not a baby when the wise men came to see him. He was a young child. All right, verse 12, go ahead.
Verse 12. Okay. And having been warned by a dream not to return to Herod, they went into their own country by another way. And they, having departed, an angel of Yahuwah appeared to Joseph by a dream, saying, Rise up, take the child and his mother with you, and flee into Egypt, and be there until I shall tell you. For Herod is about to look for the child in order to destroy him. And rising up, he took along the child and his mother by night, and withdrew into Egypt. And he was there until the end of Herod, that might be fulfilled that spoken by Yah through the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I have called my son. Then seeing that he was mocked by the wise men, he was greatly enraged, and having sent, he killed all the boys in Bethlehem and in all its districts, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he exactly asked from the wise men.
Stop right there. So now we have this King Herod, wicked man, literally killing all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof. That is a wicked man. That is a wicked man. Now, in the scriptures, it's not broken down who this man is. But when we dig into it, you will find out that King Herod is an Edomite Yahudim.
Mm-hmm.
He is an Edomite Yahudi. He is a descendant of Esau.
Right.
And you will learn that the entire government that Yeshua was born into was a
Esau.
government ruled by Edomite Yahudim.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So you will have to ask yourself, how in the world did that happen? How in the world did Edomite even become a Yahudi? And how in the world did they even become a king to rule over the people, to even be able to call the high priests and the Pharisees and the scribes and the prophets?
Mm-hmm.
Who is this dude? Who is his family? Where does he come from?
I think they came from Tarsus area, wasn't it? Didn't Apostle Paul go to school with the Herod family?
So we'll get into all that.
Okay.
Let's continue on. We're almost done. Verse 17. Go ahead.
Verse 17. Then was fulfilled that spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, A voice was heard in Ramah, wailing and bitter weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted, because they were not. But Herod having expired, behold, an angel of Yahuwah appears to Joseph by a dream in Egypt, saying, Rise up, take along the child and his mother, and pass over into the land of Israel. For those seeking hold of the child have expired. And rising up, he took along the child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. But hearing that Archelaus reigned over Judea in place of his father Herod, he feared to go there. And being warned by a dream, he departed into the parts water, and behold, the heavens were opened and the rain poured.
Nope. I'll finish it up for you. Turn aside into the parts of Galilee, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets. He shall be called a Nazarene. All right. Thank you very much, Bakar. I appreciate that, man. Why did I have us read Matthew chapter 2? Because when you're first introduced to the scriptures, especially as a Christian, and you're reading the New Testament, because that's where they slam dunk you in, you're told a lie, and then you're slam dunked into Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. All right? What you're told is that really the Old Testament is done away with, and you're told that from Malachi to Matthew, there was roughly 400 plus years of silence. That's the Christian, Catholic, doulo way of basically lying to you and saying that we don't want to talk about those books that actually document and describe that period of time. Even though we make movies of Cleopatra, we make movies of Julius Caesar and Mark Antony and all that, they don't tell you that the forefather to this Herod actually was dealing with them. They talk about Alexander the Great. They don't tell you that our people had interactions with Alexander the Great. They don't tell you that there was a time period and that the Most High was still dealing with his people. There was not 400 years of silence. Okay, there is a very rich and detailed history that has been hidden from each and every one of us until now. And so now is the time to dig into these works. It's not enough to have the Apocrypha. It's not enough to have it on your bookshelf. You have to read it. Same thing when it comes to Josephus. It's a thick book. That's your history. So we're going to dig into this a little bit. Right now, there's so much wealth of information that I want to get into, but we are going to start in Josephus, Book 12, Chapter 1. And then from there, we're going to dig into Chapter 5, and then I will be going into Maccabees, First Maccabees, Chapter 1. And there's a reason why I'm going in that order, and that's for context. Okay? So, some of this will overlap, but I need you to take notes, especially if you've never given this subject much thought. All right? So, I'm going to go ahead and begin. Chapter 1.
Okay, we're Book 2, Chapter 1?
We are in Book 12.
12, okay. Sorry about that.
Chapter 1.
Gotcha.
Now when Alexander, king of Macedon, had put an end to the dominion of the Persians and had settled the affairs of Judea after the aforementioned manner, he ended his life. And as his government fell among many, Antigonus obtained Asia, Seleucus, Babylon, and of the other nations which were there, Lysimachus governed the Hellespont, Cassander possessed Macedonia, as did Ptolemy, the son of Lagus, seized upon Egypt. And while these princes ambitiously strove one against another, every one for his own principality, underline that word, it came to pass that there were continual wars, and those lasting wars too. And the cities were sufferers, and lost a great many of their inhabitants in these times of distress, insomuch that all Syria, by the means of Ptolemy, the son of Lagus, underwent the reverse of that denomination of Savior, which he then had. He also seized upon Where? Jerusalem. And for that end made use of deceit and treachery. For as he came into the city on a Sabbath day, as if he would offer sacrifice, he, without any trouble, gained the city, while the Jews, or Yahudi, did not oppose him, for they did not suspect him to be their enemy. And he gained it thus, because they were free from suspicion of him, and because on that day they were at rest and quietness. And when he had gained it, he reigned over it in a cruel manner. Nay, Agathocles of Onidas, who wrote the Acts of Alexander's successors, reproaches us with superstition, as if we, by it, had lost our liberty, where he says thus: there is a nation called the nation of the Yahudi, who inhabit a city strong and great, named Jerusalem. These men took no care, but let it come into the hands of Ptolemy, as not willing to take arms, and thereby they submitted to be under a hard master, by reason of their unreasonable superstition. This is what is related of our nation. But when Ptolemy had taken a great many captives, underline that or make note of that, but when Ptolemy had taken a great many captives, both from the mountainous parts of Judea and from the places about Jerusalem and Samaria and the places near Mount Gerizim, he led them all into Egypt. He led them all into Egypt and settled them there. And as he knew that the people of Jerusalem were most faithful in their observances and observation of oaths and covenants, and this from the answer they had made to Alexander when he sent an embassy to them after he had beaten Darius in battle, so he distributed many of them into garrisons, and at Alexandria gave them equal privileges of citizens with the Macedonians themselves, and required of them to take their oaths that they would keep their fidelity to the posterity of those who committed these places to their care. That is a way of saying they became Gentiles. Nay, there were not a few other Jews, or Yahudi, who of their own accord went into Egypt, as invited by the goodness of the soil and by the liberality of Ptolemy. However, there were disorders among their posterity with relation to the Samaritans. Write this down. Ask the question, who are the Samaritans? Don't go off what you think you know. Pose the question to yourself for further digging. Who are the Samaritans? Now, this is on account of their resolution to preserve that conduct of life which was delivered to them by their forefathers, and they thereupon contended one with another, while those of Jerusalem said that their temple was holy and resolved to send their sacrifices there. But the Samaritans were resolved that they should be sent to Mount Gerizim. That is the end of chapter 1. All right. Before we move on to chapter 5, any observations, any statements or questions?
When you read about how they led them to Egypt, it reminded me of I think it's in Isaiah when the Most High when the prophet is speaking of us being recovered or recovered out of Egypt. In these days, I think it's Isaiah 15, I think. But that's just something that caught my ear. recovered from Egypt, Pathros, that verse. I don't know about heart, but
once you find that, you can go ahead and break that out.
Okay.
We'll put it in the chat group, something like that.
I love it.
Anybody else?
One of the things that I caught was when they felt that we were superstitious, and therefore by us being superstitious, we, gladly or whatever gave into Ptolemy. And it's like, no, we were on our Shabbat, and we trusted him. So I find that interesting that the lies are beginning. The lies began about us on what they thought we were.
Anybody else?
I look at the Samaritan situation, and it just kind of really reminds me of the woman at the well and who they really were. They weren't so-called Samaritans, but they were bruised. That's when she was saying about, oh yeah, we will worship in that day at a certain mountain. And then Most High, he told her, if you knew, basically who she was basically talking to, she would have just like, oh wow, okay, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, that kind of just clarifies and what I've already knew about the Samaritan woman. People think of the Samaritan woman, but these people were actually Hebrews. That's why that's when the Mashiach said, I have to, how he was talking to, he had to go to Samaria. And he also said that he only went to the lost tribe of the house of Israel. So why would he have to go there if he wasn't going to the Gentiles? So obviously that just makes more sense there.
All right, so hate to go here with you. Are you sure they're Hebrew?
Am I sure? I am about.
Are you sure?
I put it this way. I'm about 98.9% because the way she said we're going to worship in a certain mountain, I can't recall. I have to go back to that scripture. That just told it all off to me right there that she was of Hebrew. And she said, are they the ones? Is he the one that they expect? Remember, she was saying basically, are you the Messiah? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that just like blam right there because nobody else was expecting that except for the bruise. So
all right, so I will tell you, dig deeper. Are you sure they're Hebrews?
Uh-huh.
So, looking Kings, look at the division between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom.
Right.
Also look at the Assyrian captivity and look what was done to the northern kingdom. And look who was put in the place of the northern kingdom. And look into the issue of lions. So dig deeper. Okay. Don't assume anything and don't go off of previous knowledge. Keep digging. So we're not quite right. Let's keep digging. Anybody else? We're going to dig into chapter 5.
I find it interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say I find it interesting that we let our guards down entirely, and that Ptolemy was able to just come on in and take captive of us during our Shabbat.
Absolutely. I will just this will be my only input on this. I question how in the world was that going to work for Ptolemy to be able to offer sacrifices on the Shabbat.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out like that. I got to dig deeper into that. Like, how was that going to work? So that's a question mark, even for me to dig deeper to kind of get some context in regards to, man, how was that going to work? So, but yeah, that was a great insight. How was that even possible? All right. Next person.
So what I was going to say with regard to the Samaritans is that they were half or partially part Hebrew and part something else. I forgot which. And I think we had this discussion in a previous conference call about who they were and how they were.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop there.
Absolutely. And we'll cover that actually in this next chapter here a little bit briefly. It's another aspect of it because, again, there's so much rich information. Anybody else? All right, let's dig into it.
I was reminded.
Chapter 5. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, never mind.
No, you're good. You're reminded what?
Oh, they already said it was. I was just going to say the woman at the well. I was reminded of that too.
Right. And there is an actual revelation that can be understood and revealed when you look at the context. Okay. When you look at what Mashiach was doing, and you look into how he dealt with them. And those of you that were on that call where we dealt with this subject, it's very powerful when you look into that. Okay? But let me dig right into this for time's sake. Chapter 5. About this time, upon the death of Onyas, the high priest, they gave the high priesthood to Yeshua, his brother. For that son which Onyas left, or Onyas the fourth, was yet but an infant. And in its proper place, we will inform the reader of all the circumstances that befell this child. But this Yeshua, who was the brother of Onyas, was deprived of the high priesthood by the king, who was angry with him and gave it to his younger brother, whose name was also Onyas. For Simon had these 3 sons, to each of whom the priesthood came. As we have already informed the reader, which we'll get into that later time, this Yeshua changed his name to Yasun, but Onyas was called Menelaus. Now as the former high priest, Yeshua raised a sedition against Menelaus, who was ordained after him. The multitude were divided between them both. And the sons of Tobias took the part of Menelaus, but the greater part of the people assisted Yasun. And by that means, Menelaus and the sons of Tobias were distressed and retired to Antiochus and informed him that they were desirous to leave the laws of their country and the Yahudi way of living according to them, and to follow the king's laws and the Grecian way of living, wherefore they desired his permission to build them a gymnasium at Jerusalem. And when he had given them leave, they also hid the circumcision of their genitals, that even when they were naked, they might appear to be Greeks. Maya. Accordingly, they left off all the customs that belonged to their own country and imitated the practices of other nations. Now Antiochus, upon the agreeable situation of the affairs of his kingdom, resolved to make an expedition against Egypt, both because he had a desire to gain it and because he contemned the son of Ptolemy as now weak, and now yet of abilities to manage affairs of such consequence. So he came with a great force to Pelusium and circumvented Ptolemy Philometor by treachery and seized upon Egypt. He then came to the places about Memphis, and when he had taken them, he had made haste to Alexandria in hopes of taking it by siege and of subduing Ptolemy, who reigned there. But he was driven not only from Alexandria, but out of all Egypt by the declaration of the Romans, who charged him to let that country alone. So the Romans interceded. Accordingly, as I have elsewhere formerly declared, I will now give a particular account of what concerns this king, how he subdued Judea and the temple, for in my former work I mentioned those things very briefly, and have therefore now thought it necessary to go over that history again, and that with great accuracy. Let's get into this. King Antiochus, returning out of Egypt for fear of the Romans, made an expedition against the city Jerusalem. And when he was there in the 143rd year of the kingdom of Seleucida, he took the city without fighting, those of his own party opening the gates to him. And when he had gotten possession of Jerusalem and slew many of the opposite or opposing party, and when he had plundered it a great deal of money, he returned to Antioch. Now it came to pass, after 2 years, in the 145th year, on the 25th day of that month, which is by us called Caslu, and by the Macedonians Apelles, in the 153rd Olympiad, that the king came to Jerusalem, and pretending peace, he got possession of the city by treachery, at which time he spared not so much as those that admitted him into it, on account of the riches that lay in the temple, but led by his covetous inclination, for he saw there was in it a great deal of gold and many ornaments that had been dedicated to it of a very great value. And in order to plunder its wealth, he ventured to break the league he had made. So he left the temple bare and took away the golden candlesticks, the golden altar of incense, the table of showbread, the altar of burnt offering, and did not abstain from even the veils, which were made of fine linen and scarlet. He also emptied it of its secret treasures and left nothing at all remaining. You need to look into and ask the question, what were the temple's secret treasures? And by this means cast the Yahudim into great lamentation, for he forbade them to offer those daily sacrifices which they used to offer to Elohim according to the law. And when he had pillaged the whole city, some of the inhabitants he slew, and some he carried captive, together with their wives and children, so that the multitude of those captives that were taken alive amounted to about 10,000. He also burnt down the finest buildings, and when he had overthrown the city walls, he built a citadel in the lower part of the city, for the place was high and overlooked the temple, on which account he fortified it with high walls and towers, and put into it a garrison of who? Macedonians. You need to ask the question, who were the Macedonians? Further on, however, in that citadel dwelt the impious and the wicked part of the multitude, from whom it proved that the citizens suffered many and sore calamities. And when the king had built an idol altar upon Elohim's altar, he slew swine upon it, and so offered a sacrifice neither according to the law nor the Yahudi religious worship in that country. He also compelled them to forsake the worship which they paid their own Elohim, and to adore those whom he took to be Elohim, and made them build temples. He made them build temples. Oh, and to raise idol altars in every city and every village, and to offer swine upon them every day.
Wicked.
My goodness.
Yeah, boy.
Yo.
Man.
He also commanded them not
Wine.
to circumcise. He also commanded them not to circumcise their sons, and threatened to punish any that should be found to have transgressed his injunction. He also appointed overseers, sambos, coons, who should compel them to do what he commanded.
Wow.
These were Hebrew Israelites that he appointed to be overseers, who should compel them to do what he commanded. And indeed, many Yahudi there were who complied with the king's command, either voluntarily or out of fear of the penalty that was denounced. But the best men and those of the noblest souls did not regard him, but did pay a greater respect to the customs of their country than concern as to the punishment which he threatened to disobedient. On which account they every day underwent great miseries and bitter torments, for they were whipped with rods, and their bodies were torn to pieces. They were crucified while they were still alive and breathed. They also strangled those women and their sons whom they had circumcised, as the king had appointed, hanging their sons about their necks as they were upon the crosses. This is hard. I'm not going to lie. This is hard to read. It's hard to read. It's hard to read. And if there were any sacred book of the law found, it was destroyed.
Wow.
And those with whom they were found miserably perished also. All right, let's answer this question very briefly. When the Samaritans saw the Yahudi under these sufferings, they no longer confessed that they were of their kindred, nor that the temple on Mount Gerizim belonged to Almighty Elohim. This was according to their nature, as we have already shown. And they now said that they were a colony of the Medes and Persians, and indeed they were a colony of theirs. So they sent ambassadors to Antiochus and an epistle, whose contents, man, these folks are these. To King Antiochus, the god Epiphanes, a memorial from Sidonians who live at Shechem. Our forefathers, upon certain frequent plagues, and as following a certain ancient superstition, had a custom of observing that day, which by the Yahudi is called the Sabbath. And when they had erected a temple at the mountain called Gerizim, but without a name, they offered upon it the proper sacrifices. Now, upon the just treatment of these wicked Yahudi, those that manage their affairs, supposing that we are kin to them and practice as they do, make us liable to the same accusations, although we are originally Sidonians, and that's evident from the public records.
Wow.
Thank you, folks. We therefore beseech thee, our benefactor and Savior, to give order to Apollonius, the governor of this part of the country, and to Nicanor, the procurator of thy affairs, to give us no disturbance, nor to lay to our charge what the Yahudim are accused of. For since we are aliens from their nation, and from their customs. But let our temple, which at present hath no name at all, be named the Temple of Jupiter Hellenaeus.
Okay.
These folks, man, if this were once done, we should be no longer disturbed, but should be more intent on our own occupation with quietness, and so bring in a greater revenue to thee. When the Samaritans have petitioned for this, the king sent them back the following answer in an epistle. King Antiochus to Nicanor, the Sidonians who live at Shechem have sent me the memorial enclosed. When therefore we were advising with our friends about it, the messengers sent by them represented to us that they are no way concerned with accusations which belong to the Yahudim, but choose to live after the custom of the Greeks. Accordingly, we declare them free from such accusations in order that, agreeable to their petition, their temple be named the Temple of Jupiter Hellenaeus. He also sent the like epistle to Apollonius, the governor of that part of the country, in the 46th year and the 80th day of the month of Hecatombeon. And we will leave it at that. That was Josephus, Book 12, Chapter 1, and we just finished Chapter 5. All right, let's open that up. Go ahead, and what are your thoughts on that?
Wicked.
So, as we discussed before, the Samaritans were fair weather Hebrews.
They weren't even Hebrews.
Part Hebrews.
No.
They weren't even Hebrews. Now, what I will tell you, to just put it out there, because the Samaritans were not Hebrews. That said, what you do have is admixture with Edomite Yahudim. You do have mixture with Edomite Yahudim, because the Edomite Yahudim were the ones that had intermarried with them and took over, acting as though they're part of the Levitical priesthood when they're not. So, I'm deviating a little bit, but just to hit that home, since it keeps talking about the Hebrews. They're not Hebrews.
Okay.
But if you want to push that to say they're Hebrews, the only way you could say some of them are Hebrews is that there was intermixture with the Edomite Yahudim.
Okay. Okay.
So to this day, and I'll get into this at a later time, to this day, the Kohens of the Samaritans, the modern-day European whited-out Samaritans, which the average people are just converts, they're just regular, like, European folks. But the Kohen family, those have paternal ancestry that traces back to Edomite Yahudim. They have E1B1B paternal ancestry that ties back to Esau Edom. And so they took the position as being the high priest amongst the Samaritans. So they joined themselves to the Samaritans. The Edomites joined to many people, and of those people, they joined to the Samaritans. And so as far as being a descendant of Abraham or Isaac, it would come through primarily Esau Edom. Any other questions or statements? Because that was a lot in there.
Yeah, the whole sacrificing every day, swine every day.
Yeah.
That whole scenario.
That's the
man, that's miserable.
Oh, that is, man. But it reminded me of Daniel. And Daniel was prophesying about that.
Right.
The abomination, desolation.
Absolutely. That's what was talking about.
Yeah, that moves me to see that actually went on like that. And we was falling for those type of things every day.
every day.
Mm. Yeah. Every day.
Anybody else?
So for me, I just the killings, the tortures, what we went through because we were trying to maintain what Yah told us to do, and so therefore the torment, the killings that we had to go through, and that our babies had to go through. So
yeah, that's rough for me, and I tell you, I mean, to me that broke me down a little bit because we're going to read a similar account in the book of Maccabees. Okay, that breaks this down from the actual book of Maccabees. The aspect that is not mentioned is the aspect that the mothers were crucified. The mothers were crucified. And the babies were hung around their mothers' necks while they were upon the cross. Yo, I can't.
What
I can't. I can't.
I know it's hard. It's very hard. And forgive me for crying, but I can't deal with that. Yeah.
It's very deep and you know, trust. Those that know me know I've been in front of many people, broke down crying. This is tough to go into because, you know, our heart is for our people. We want our people to come out and wake up, and we want to end the cycle of bondage and oppression. And, you know, you look at the wickedness that's happened to our people here in the Americas by these Gentile nations. And we have to fight for our people.
Exactly.
We have to fight back, okay? And we have to snatch our people up out of these dens of wickedness because they just ignorantly don't know. And the reality is that we've been covered by grace in our ignorance through this process we've gone through. But literally, it's time to wake up and come out of Babylon. Because we were that generation that were completely cut off and did not know. Our parents did not know. Our grandparents didn't know. Our great-grandparents didn't know. They literally kidnapped the children of Israel and scattered them throughout the earth and kept them ignorant and brainwashed. Oh, listen, this is why the recompense is going to be so brutal. Because what was done to Israel. I'm going to mention this and then we'll move on. You know, for most of us, for most of us that have lineage that goes back to Nigeria and Cameroon, Congo, all right, there's a slave port called Calabar. And there's a whole thing that went down there, but they literally did witchcraft on us. Okay, where they made us drink water from a well that was spellbound in order to make us forget who we were. They would make us walk around this tree so many times to literally as a ritual to make us forget who we were. That's how deep this thing goes. I'll bring that out in a different video later on, but just the level of depravity and evil and wickedness of these people. Israel don't got no friends or allies, even 1,000. I mean, you see, we thought, oh, these guys are cool. Yeah, come on through. And they took advantage and exploited us. They took advantage of us. But anyway, yeah, please bring it out. Any other comments or statements you want to make in regards to what we read? Because it's a lot. It's a lot of deep history there.
I mean, so they walked through on the Sabbath and took our people captive.
Mm-hmm.
Because of what? I mean, were we disobedient at that point? And I'm sorry because I had to walk away for a minute and I kind of missed it. So help me to make sense of that, please.
So I can't get into that right now. We have to get deeper into the lesson to finish out around about at least to chapter 3 if possible. But what I will tell you is that the number one theme you will find during this period of time is that there was strife within Israel. There was contention within Israel. There was, let me put it to you this way. There are cycles to this thing, and what you see is a cycle of infighting, civil war within the Yahudim. Okay, you have infighting within the southern kingdom and infighting between the ruling class and the lower class. And you have basically, it would be equivalent to, let's just say in regards to the rebirth of a nation ministry, it'd be equivalent to Josh beefing against Mo, beefing against me, and we all beefing against each other, and there's discord and disharmony within us. That's what was happening within Israel, specifically within Judea. You'll see that theme across the board. So, like, if you go back to chapter 1, you really have to pay attention. It opens up with strife and conflict over who's going to be the high priest, who's going to be the king. I don't like you, so I'm choosing your little brother to be the high priest. And there's all this backbiting and infighting and strifing within Israel that's happening. And the bottom line is the common theme you see is that when there's like a civil war or infighting within Israel, or specifically within Judea, a house divided cannot stand, so therefore it crumbles. And it allows room for the enemy to come in and destroy.
Okay. Say no more, I get it.
Anybody else? Because again, that's a lot that you can pull from out of chapter 1 or chapter 5. Don't hold back. It's an opportunity.
The only thing I was going to say is that listening to how cruel they were in the way that they administered death reminded me of Maccabees, because when I read that about a year ago, like, that really, really troubled me to see what they did to people who were just trying to hold on to their belief and their Elohim and everything, and the way that they did it. It's unimaginable, you know. It's really hard to even want to imagine. So that's all I have to say.
I'm tripping on the fact that our people decided to just do away with our customs that the Most High gave us, and willingly, put everything aside and physically try to make themselves appear to be as these other people. I don't understand.
Yeah, that was disheartening. I mean, this is raw. This is raw. This is real. This is not holding back. This is like raw. You know what I mean? It's tough. It's tough because, I mean, if you pay attention, like I said, pay attention to these things. There was strifing between the house of Israel, which led to one side, the losing side, to basically say, if I can't have Jerusalem, then I'm going to go and ally with the heathen.
Yeah. One of the things,
ally with the heathen.
Right. One of the other things two things that I noticed, that they just annihilated everything out of the temple. But the Samaritans and we were talking about that earlier today when we were having our Shabbat here in Portland, that people want our blessings, but they don't want the curses. They want to be us as long as they get in the blessings, but they don't want to be us when it comes to curses or it comes to trial and tribulation. And here the Samaritans were, the Samaritans were okay as long as we're going to practice the same thing that the Yahudim are doing, but all of a sudden, oh no, we're really not Yahudim. We don't practice that because, the minute they found out all this, yeah. Hey, no, we're not them. We're not them. We're really not. We don't do what they do. Matter of fact, the mountain really didn't have a name, so we're going to take this name here. So, like,
man. Look, these folks ain't no good, man. They ain't no good, man. That's why I posed the question before previously to you guys was, why do you think the Samaritans were so despised by the Yahudim? And that's the reason why. There's a long history there where when things are good, they repping hard. Oh, yeah, our forefathers, and oh, yeah, our ancestors, and oh, yeah, they about that life all day, every day. You know what I'm saying? But then, like it's clearly plainly seen when there's trials and tribulations against Israel and things are not in our favor, then they go to such extents as this. And to break out the public record, we was tripping. We Sidonians. We not even a part of these people. We don't. It look like we do what they do, but we don't. That's crazy. They just happen to be on the Shabbat. Hey, these folks, man. Even Josephus don't like these folks. He be hating on these folks. He be like, man, I can't stand these people. Yeah. And that would be frustrating, honestly, if you think about it. That would be frustrating because you got a people that, they want to rep being a part of your people. Like you said, everybody want to be an Israelite until it's time to be an Israelite.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I mean, it is what it is. Anybody else have any statements or comments they want to make? Please do. Go ahead. It's your time. All right. For time's sake, we're going to keep pressing on, and now we are going to get into First Maccabees. So what you read, for context, okay, you received the backdrop and some of the additional details that can be found within First Maccabees. You actually read that or heard that from the book of Josephus that brought out some additional insight. So now what I would challenge you to do is, again, pay attention and compare and contrast some of the details between the two. All right? So, starting in verse 1. After Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, and if you can, go ahead and mute yourself real quick. But just be sure to unmute yourself once I'm done. All right? I'll go chapter 1, and then I'll ask you to unmute yourselves, and we're going to discuss that, okay? All right. After Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim, make note, Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim, had defeated King Darius of the Persians and the Medes. He succeeded him as king. He had previously become king of Greece. He fought many battles, conquered strongholds, and put to death the kings of the earth. He advanced to the ends of the earth and plundered many nations. When the earth became quiet before him, he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. He gathered a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations, and princes. and they became tributary to him. After this, he fell sick and perceived that he was dying. So he summoned his most honored officers, who had been brought up with him from his youth, and divided his kingdom among them while he was still alive. And after Alexander had reigned 12 years, he died. Then his officers began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death, and so did their descendants after them for many years, and they caused many evils on the earth. From them came forth a sinful root, Antiochus Epiphanes, son of King Antiochus. He had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days, certain renegades came out from Israel and led or misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the Gentiles around us. For since we separated from them, many disasters have come upon us." This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the Gentiles. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem, according to Gentile custom, and removed the marks of circumcision and abandoned the Holy Covenant. They joined with the Gentiles and sold themselves to do evil. When Antiochus saw that his kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt in order that he might reign over both kingdoms. So he invaded Egypt with a strong force, with chariots and elephants and cavalry, and with a large fleet. He engaged King Ptolemy of Egypt in battle, and Ptolemy turned and fled before him, and many were wounded and fell. They captured the fortified cities in the land of Egypt, and he plundered the land of Egypt. Now, after subduing Egypt, Antiochus returned in the 143rd year. He went up against Israel and came to Jerusalem with a strong force. He arrogantly entered the sanctuary and took the golden altar, the lampstand for the light, and all its utensils. He took also the table for the bread of the presence, the cups for the drink offerings, the bowls, the golden censers, the curtain, the crowns, the gold decoration on the front of the temple. He stripped it all off. He took the silver and the gold and the costly vessels. He took the hidden treasures that he found. Taking them all, he went into his own land. He shed much blood and spoke with great arrogance. Israel mourned deeply in every community. Rulers and elders groaned. Young women, young men became faint. The beauty of women faded. Every bridegroom took up the lament. She who sat in the bridal chamber was mourning. Even the land trembled for its inhabitants, and all the house of Jacob was clothed with shame. 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and the children and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful people, men who were renegades. These strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food. In collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored them there and became a great menace. For the citadel became an ambush against the sanctuary, an evil adversary of Israel at all times. On every side of the sanctuary, they shed innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary. Because of them, the residents of Jerusalem fled. She, Jerusalem, became a dwelling of strangers. She, Jerusalem, became strange to her own offspring, and her children forsook her. Her sanctuary became desolate, like a desert. Her feasts were turned into mourning, her Sabbaths into a reproach, her honor into contempt. Her dishonor now grew as great as her glory. Her exaltation was turned into mourning. Then the king wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and that all should give up their particular customs. All the Gentiles accepted the command of the king. Many, even from Israel, gladly adopted his religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah. He directed them to follow customs strange to the land, to forbid burnt offerings and sacrifices and drink offerings in the sanctuary, to profane Sabbaths and festivals, to defile the sanctuary and the priests, to build altars, sacred precincts, and shrines for idols, to sacrifice swine and other unclean animals, and to leave their sons uncircumcised. They were to make them abominable by everything unclean and profane, so that they would forget the law and change all the ordinances. He added, and whoever does not obey the command of the king shall die. In such words he wrote to his whole kingdom. He appointed inspectors, overseers over all the people, and commanded the towns of Judah to offer sacrifice, town by town. Many of the people, everyone who forsook the law, joined them, and they did evil in the land. They drove Yisrael into hiding in every place of refuge they had. Now, on the 15th day of Kislev, in the 145th year, they erected a desolating sacrilege on the altar of burnt offering. They also built altars in the surrounding towns of Judah and offered incense at the doors of the houses and in the streets. The books of the law that they found, they tore to pieces and burned with fire. Anyone found possessing the book of the covenant, or anyone who had adhered to the law, was condemned to death by decree of the king. They kept using violence against Israel, against those who were found month after month in the towns. On the 25th day of the month, they offered sacrifice on the altar that was on top of the altar of burnt offering. According to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised, and the families and those who circumcised them. and they hung the infants from their mothers' necks. I need you to understand, listen, this says, according to the decree, they put to death the women who had their children circumcised and their families. Man. But many in Israel stood firm and were resolved in their hearts not to eat unclean foods. They chose to rather die than be defiled by food or to profane the holy covenant, and they did die. Very great wrath came upon Israel.
Wow.
All right. That was chapter 1.
Oh, my.
That was chapter 1. Let's pause for a minute. Yeah, open up the line. Man, what are your thoughts on chapter 1?
I think the thing that I heard that stands out is even the land shook.
Yeah.
From the desolation and that was going on. That was pretty powerful.
Absolutely.
And that the land that they were in, that they turned all of their customs and all of the laws and statutes and commandments and burned the books because the people of that land wanted them to be just like they were. Sounds oddly familiar.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My goodness.
Because they want that, just like now, where they want us to be just like them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not you. Never will be. Never, ever. So.
But it makes me, you clearly hear Yahusha warning about this whole event taking place when he told them when they see the abomination of desolation, when the city is surrounded by armies, flee. And when that happened, when these things was going on, rather, it just sounds the same, like the same thing happening again, making them follow strange laws, sacrificing swine, just destroying everything. And it also makes me think of when Shaul talked about the mystery of iniquity already is at work. It already does work. You see it in action here. Iniquity being lawlessness. They was just changing everything around. They were taking away Shabbats. They were just making everything an abomination.
Right.
So this is just crazy. To the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. That's iniquity.
Yep.
That's what that reminds me of. Because it's already, the mystery of iniquity has already been at work. It's been something that's been going on. It's to get us deviated and to stray us away from the Most High's laws.
Right.
And that's what's going on here. That's what's happened to us as a people. At least on this level, because there's so many different levels to the mystery of iniquity in itself. But lawlessness is definitely at work right here in this chapter.
And also, it goes back also within us, even to this day, we have that portion of us that want to be like these other nations. We have that portion of us that, we're good. And here we had people gladly adopting the heathen's religion, gladly sacrificing to idols, gladly profaning the Sabbath, and didn't have an issue with it. And we have, some of us are still that way today.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. All those religions,
I don't know.
all those religions turn you from Torah. They turn you away from law into iniquities, and that's crazy. But, yeah.
They're doing the work of their father.
Yeah. That's true.
But today, they weren't acting in ignorance because they knew who the Most High was, and they knew they had a covenant with the Most High. They knew it. Our people today, they don't have any clue that we are in covenant with Him. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the part where we have to educate our people because we're still under a covenant with Him. So I think that's the biggest difference. Mostly, I believe, what is done, it is done just out of sheer ignorance.
Yeah, at this point, because the curses we've been destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We are fully, yeah. We've been destroyed. So as a person that you bring up out of a grave, you know what I mean? You have to fully restore, fully awaken, and to them back to their everything that they were before being destroyed. You have to restore that. Back then, you know, they knew they was bruised. They knew they was in covenant and everything. Now at this point, at this time, we just we gone. So to restore all that is the bigger feat.
Yeah, which takes time. So many of our people have rejected the truth when it's brought to them, and we were speaking about that, Brother Mac here in Portland, speaking about that today, that we need to remember that the Most High had patience and worked on us all these years to wake us up, that we also need to extend that to our brothers and sisters as we bring this truth to them. Yeah, we definitely have been destroyed, so utterly destroyed that the truth smacks you in the face and you still don't see it. Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
And this is how, to me, if you're not seeing discrepancies in the Bible and in Christianity, or in between Christianity and the Bible, and if you're not seeing that and you're not seeking that, you have no idea that you're missing something, and that you got questions that need to be answered. And in our group of people, at least the people in Phoenix, almost everybody who was in that room had questions, and they wanted answers to those questions. And if you're not seeking, then you don't know that there's a problem. And if you don't know there's a problem, you ain't looking for no answers. So until people recognize, wait a minute, there's some discrepancies here between what they're teaching and what's written here.
That's true. That's true. You have to be seeking, and that's
to be seeking.
Yes, that's the big factor, right? And I think, unfortunately, in Christianity, so many people want the pastor to tell them everything. They don't bring their Bible to church, or they don't even read their Bibles, or, whatever the pastor says, that's good for me. Because the pastor should be reading the Bible and telling, and that's their mentality. And so they don't, like you said, they're not seeking and asking questions to get the answers to their questions. Because he said, you seek me, you will find me.
Yes.
But we have to be seeking.
So I think that's the biggest problem. They're not looking, and they're okay where they are because they don't know that they need to be looking.
Yep.
And true. So it takes somebody to drop a word for them, and they hear it, but they don't know what to, okay, you blow that off. Okay, did you know that you were the Hebrew, the Israel? Did you know that you were Israel? That our people were the ones that we're the descendants of the people of the Bible? Did you know that? Oh, really? They hear it. Yeah. But it's going to take somebody else to come along and somebody else to come along after that. That's even what happened to me, and we were looking.
Right.
So I can, I understand what people about that. I understand that.
Well, it's a paradigm shift. It's a huge paradigm shift because we were born into this system. Like I said, our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and on down the line didn't know. And so we were born and raised in Christianity and believed it. So.
A lot of work to be done. One thing that I often do is take people that are new to this awakening to Maccabees, really to show them the importance of Torah, because this is a snapshot in one chapter that highlights the depths the heathen will go to cut you off from obeying the law, statutes, and commandments.
Right.
This is the length and depth that they're willing to go in order to cut you off. If that don't shake you, I don't know what will. So
hello.
true. Say again?
Yeah, so apparently then, this is, I'm from Houston here. Apparently then our connection with the Most High must have been very heavy, very deep for them, for this other nations to want to cut us off.
Absolutely. I mean, this is brutal. I mean, I mean, it, and like I said, when I look at book 12 of Josephus in chapter 5, I just, to get the revelation that they were crucifying our women and hanging the infants from their necks, and that if a woman was found to have circumcised her son on the 8th day, according to the Torah, that not only her and her child were killed, but the entire family. So you could have been one of the folks thinking like, okay, I'm going to be like the Gentiles and be cool, and your cousin decided to keep Torah, and the whole family's getting took out. The whole lineage is getting took out. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Just for keeping the law. They you see that they're aiming at people who are actually keeping the law. They aiming for y'all. They was aiming for our people.
But you know what the big question is? I mean, I know we were powerful, because y'all had us. But it goes. I'm just floored that the hatred is so ingrained that they will go to these lengths, this depth, just because we chose to follow Torah.
Right.
And their hatred is that high for the fact that we weren't doing anything to them. That's the thing. We didn't do anything to these people. Kind of like today. Kind of like today. We don't do. do anything, but they feel the need. They feel the need to do what they still doing today. Even though a lot of us aren't even going according to Torah, they still have this need, this deep-seated hatred to still do the stuff that they've been doing all these thousands of years. And we haven't done anything to them.
And the hatred isn't because we're black. It's because we're Hebrew.
Right. It's because we're the bloodline Israelites, period.
Yeah.
Well, because they hate Elohim. That's who they hate. So it doesn't have anything necessarily to do with us, except for that we belong to him.
I will tell you guys that what you guys just brought out there is something that needs to be stressed, okay, because our people are hurting. We don't know why we're going through what we're going through. And you will hear from the lowest level Hebrew to the most prominent and influential Hebrew, they keep talking about color or black or being a person of color or being a minority. And it has nothing to do with any of that.
No,
you
not
don't
at all.
try to pass it off on being just black or a Negro, whatever. It's because you are a descendant of the biblical Israelites. It's not about color. The majority of this earth is a melanated people unless they wipe themselves out. Everybody has some form and degree of melanation. So it's not,
a black thing.
I'm black. Because there's Indians from India that are darker than most of us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not even about color. It's who you are, and we have to really get away from, you're just doing this because I'm black. No, it's because of who you are and who you belong to. So, but yeah, chapter 1 is so deep. And I don't want to rush it. I don't want to keep you on the phone forever. You have to go. But anyone else have anything they want to bring out, anything else they want to say in regards to chapter 1? I will mention this one last thing for me, and I just find that we fled from Jerusalem. We literally left it desolate and just gave it up to the heathen. It was trodden down by these heathen folks, and
it still is.
We were hunted.
Yes.
It talks about month to month they were hunting after us.
Yep.
That's insane.
Man.
You're just straight evil.
They are their father, Hasatan.
It's rough. It's a rough read. But before I move on to chapter 2, anybody have anything else they want to mention about chapter 1?
So I kind of just look at the ancient evil ruach in these people, because if you look at the same thing they did back then, you come all the way up through the historical line, they're constantly doing the same thing. It shows this is an ancient demonic entity that's in them, doing the same thing over and over and over again, because you can see everything is repeated, So, they're not even, of course, it's not about color.
Absolutely.
And a lot of these people, even now, they don't really know who we are. But it's the ancient demon or demonic forces that's in them, that's driving them, that recognizes the Most High's hand on us. And that's what they're retaliating. It's a spiritual wickedness in high places, like Saul or Apostle Paul was telling the people. He said, this warfare is not against flesh and blood, because realistically, if you go to a heathen right here in our country right now, or their country right now that we're captive in, they don't know who we are by bloodline. You ask most of them, we are the hidden ones on the earth. But it's that ancient demonic entity that's driving them, their Hasatan, their father, that recognizes our father. You know what I'm saying? So that's why the scripture says it's a spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
That's the mystery of iniquity. That's the mysterious part of it. It's spiritual, a spiritual wickedness being manifested in the physical.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because
Like
they've always.
in Revelation it says the dragon went to make war with the remnant of her seed.
That's right.
He's making war with us. This is war.
It is. And so don't you understand now the extent of why David, how he went after the heathens and he had no mercy?
Right.
He got with them because he understood who they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we were always taught, before we came into the knowledge of who we are, that we were Hamites, Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so these people don't know who we are, and it is, and like you said, Mac, Brother Mac, it's a spiritual thing. It's the demonic spirits that are controlling these people, and they know who we are. So therefore, this hatred is going to be continual.
Mm-hmm. That's why the Most High is letting a cup of iniquity fill, because there's a certain judgment He wants for these people. You say you're Hasatan, see, I'm going to give you the punishment of Hasatan. So I just thank the Most High that greater He that is within us than he that is in the world. Because at the end of the day, I'll read to the back of the book, we win. We win. And think about it. They don't have to come back around. They're going to face you. They're going to see you again. Either in this lifetime or the next one to come. They're going to see you. All you got to do is hold on to the faith and make sure you keep the law, statutes, and commandments. Love your brothers as yourself and love the Most High. And I guarantee you'll be seeing things on a different level on the other side. And like I said, this thing will come full circle. They're going to have to come back around to you. They're going to have to come back around to you. That's even a scripture right there.
All right. So what I'm going to do right now, great conversation and dialogue. This is what I like. I encourage. Don't be shy on these calls. We're all family. Most of us on this call are directly a part of our assembly. Okay. So the various assemblies that we have across the nation, so it's all good, all right? Open up, have the dialogue and discussion, and then for those that might join from, the Facebook page or YouTube or something like that, they're welcome to join as well. But we're going to move on to chapter 2, and then we're going to stop right there. I'm thinking I might pick up tomorrow sometime on some other additional chapters. So we'll push it out a little bit later on that one. But I'm going to go on to chapter 2, and then we'll end it right there. Okay, so chapter 2, we're going to go into 1 Maccabees chapter 2. Okay, and great dialogue and discussion. All right. So in those days, Mattathias, son of Yohanan, son of Shimon, which, by the way, that's why they're called the Hasmoneans. It's because of Simeon. Okay? In those days, Mattathias, son of Yohanan, son of Simeon, a priest of the family of Yorib, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modaim. He had 5 sons: Yohanan, surnamed Gadi; Shimon, or Simon, called Thasi; Judas, called Maccabeus; Eleazar, called Avron; Jonathan, called Asas. He saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem and said, "Alas, why was I born to see this, the ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, and to live there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to aliens. Her temple has become like a person without honor. Her glorious vessels have been carried into exile. Her infants have been killed in her streets, her youths by the sword of the foe. What nation has not inherited her palaces and has not seized her spoils? All her adornment has been taken away, no longer free. she has become a slave. And see, our holy place, our beauty, and our glory has been laid waste. The Gentiles have profaned them. Why should we live any longer? Mattathias then and his sons tore their clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned greatly. The king's officers who were enforcing the apostasy came to the town of Modain to make them offer sacrifice. Many from Israel came to them. Mattathias and his sons were assembled. Then the king's officers spoke to Mattathias as follows. You are a leader, honored and great in this town, and supported by sons and brothers. Now, be the first to come and do what the king commands, as all the Gentiles and the people of Judah and those that are left in Jerusalem have done. Then you and your sons will be numbered among friends of the king, and you and your sons will be honored with silver, gold, and many gifts. But Mattathias answered and said in a loud voice, even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him and have chosen to obey his commandments, every one of them abandoning the religion of their ancestors, I and my sons and my brothers will continue to live by the covenant of our ancestors. Far be it from us to desert the law and the ordinances. We will not obey the king's words by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left. When he had finished speaking these words, a Yahudi came forward in the sight of all to offer sacrifice on the altar in Modain according to the king's command. When Mattathias saw it, he burned with zeal, and his heart was stirred. He gave vent to righteous anger. He ran and killed him on the altar. At the same time, he killed the king's officer who was forcing them to sacrifice. He tore down the altar. Thus he burned with zeal for the law, just as Phinehas did against Zimri, son of Salu. Mattathias cried out in the town with a loud voice, saying, let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me. Then he and his sons fled to the hills and left all that they had in the town. At that time, many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to live there. They, their sons, their wives, their livestock, because troubles pressed heavily upon them. And it was reported to the king's officers and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that those who had rejected the king's command had gone down to the hiding places in the wilderness. Many pursued them and overtook them. They encamped opposite them and prepared for battle against them on the Sabbath day. They said to them, enough of this. Come out and do what the king commands, and you will live. But they said, we will not come out, nor will we do the king's commands, and so profane the Sabbath day. Then the enemy quickly attacked them, but they did not answer them or hurl a stone at them or block up the hiding places. For they said, let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly. So they attacked them on the Sabbath, and they died with their wives and children and livestock, to the number of 1,000 persons. When Mattathias and his friends learned of it, they mourned for them deeply, And all said to their neighbors, if we all do as our kindred have done, and refuse to fight with the Gentiles for our lives and for our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth. So they made this decision that day. Let us fight against anyone who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. Let us not all die as our kindred died in their hiding places. Then there united with them a company of Hasidians, mighty warriors of Israel, all who offered themselves willingly to the law, and all who became fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and renegades in their wrath. The survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. Mattathias and his friends went around and tore down all the altars. They forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys that they found within the borders of Israel. They hunted down the arrogant, and their work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and kings, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand. Now, the days drew near for Mattathias to die, and he said to his son, arrogance and scorn have now become strong. It is a time of ruin and furious anger. Now, my children, show zeal for the law and give your lives for the covenant of our ancestors. Remember the deeds of the ancestors, which they did in their generations, and you will receive great honor and an everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord over Egypt. Phineas has our ancestor, because he was deeply zealous, received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Yeshua, because he fulfilled the command, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. Dawid, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Eliah, because of great zeal for the law, was taken up to heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael believed and were saved from the flame. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of lions. And so observe from generation to generation that none of those who put their trust in him will lack strength. Do not fear the words of sinners, for their splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today will be exalted, but tomorrow they will not be found, because they will have returned to dust, and their plans will have perished. My children, be courageous. Grow strong in the law, for by it you will gain honor. Here is your brother Simeon, who I know is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. He shall be your father. Judah Maccabeus has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battles against the peoples. You shall rally around you all who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles in full and obey the commands of the law. Then he blessed him and was gathered to his ancestors. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his ancestors at Moreh. And all Israel mourned for him with great lamentation. And that is 1 Maccabees chapter 2. Thank you all for joining me on this call tonight, on this blessed Shabbat. Let's open the line up. Any comments, statements in regards to chapter 2? Go right ahead.
I think they just kind of got a charge there, you know?
Yeah, I agree that he recounted what all of the strong leaders of our family did, just on behalf of their Emunah and the Most High, and recounted what our forefathers believed in, and he encouraged his sons to hold strong to that and to teach their offspring that too. It's amazing to see that fighting spirit was still within.
That reminded me that also is what stood out to me, how he reminded them of who they were. He reminded them of the people that they come from. He reminded them of their ancestors, their forefathers. He put them in remembrance of how strong of a nation that we actually are. That's what stood out to me. He reminded me of Abraham, of Joseph, of Caleb, of Joshua, of David, and the strength that they had. Also, they drew from that. So that was a good thing.
And it also, man, those are good points. It also stood out to me that what we got going on really ain't that bad. Like, it's easy to cry about, oh man, my parents, my family, they're not accepting the truth. They calling me crazy. They gossiping about me because I'm in this truth and I'm trying to tell them the truth about this Christmas and about this and that and about keeping the laws. And, sometimes we kind of fall into the slope of thinking that's persecution, which it is in a little bit. But man, here you go. We got our forefathers in this instances where, man, they were facing death and they still kept the faith. You know what I'm saying? They still kept the commandments, no matter what they were willing to die for. And many of them did. And so that's sobering and it's humbling, because it helps me to understand that, man, what we going through, man, it really ain't, all that bad. And, gives you the motivation to stand firm, no matter what. So.
Right. Real talk.
And also lets you see how Christianity has dossled down from our fathers, because that's the only way they could keep us in bondage, because we outnumber them here in the Americas, and only way they could do that is by giving us this falsified faith, or religion that caused us to look up after them instead of looking to the true Almighty, and that really just destroyed us. That's when the Scripture speaks about will be destroyed. It's talking about our heritage, our way of everything about our way of life. Even the men will have, be given this trembling of heart, and basically it's because of the curses why we fell in this dilemma. Because if we'd always made law, statutes, and commandments, the Most High was gonna fight for it, because He knows what the spiritual realm is all about. And He's like, okay, I know y'all can't do this, but you know what? As long as y'all obey me, guess what? I'm going to handle them. So you're going to be the richest nation. You're going to be the most prosperous in all your ways. He told us in the Scriptures how we will prosper. As long as we kept the commandments, law, statutes, and commandments, we're going to be good. But when we fall away from that, when we have sin on us, He had to back away from it. And that turned us over to the heathens, and they had their way with us. So we keep going back. Our fathers never could see it, but this time around, we're going to get it. We're going to get it right this time around. So that's what gives me joy, just knowing that, hey, we are overcomers. We are overcomers, you know, and we're going to win. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's a wrap. So all we got to do is stay the course. Don't let nothing deter you from this finish line. Because the finish line is within reach now, y'all. So we've come too far. Our ancestors look forward to this day. Stay the course. That's what I have to
say. A couple of things that I noticed, and I know we've touched on it, just putting on that mantle. He's telling them, you know, hey, look at Caleb, look at Joshua, look at Daniel, look at, you know, the 3 Hebrew boys, everyone. And I think just having that encouragement to look back at our ancestors and say, yes, their faith in Yah gave them that strength to stand in the time of adversity. So as long as we keep our faith in Him, He is faithful to no matter what we face, He's going to be faithful and have us to stand. And then the second thing I kind of had a chuckle was the dude that came up to do the sacrifice. It was like, dude, you gonna come up there anyway and do a sacrifice, an abominable sacrifice? And so the Maccabees turn around and go, no, unacceptable, totally unacceptable. You did now, you did, dude. You know.
But that's so hilarious though. It's so funny because I know a whole lot of Negroes like that today. A whole lot. They walking around today every day. You see them on TV. You see them, and they the ones who are sold out for the Greeks, and will go and do them sacrifices if they need to. If it means that they good with the Greeks, they good with the nations, the heathen, they gonna do whatever it takes. And those be the main people that be on the front lines.
Yep. But I know, in talking to, trying to awaken our people, and one sister that I've talked to, she goes, oh, I know we're Hebrew Israelites. And so I was like, so why are you still in the church? And why are you still eating pork? And why are you still eating pork? Myra, it's all about everybody. And plus, you can eat whatever. No, you can't. You can't. So that blinder is still on, where she feels it's okay for her to eat pork. It's okay for her to eat shrimp and eat all the unclean things because, Christianity says just pray about it, And it's, even though she knows we're Israelites, but she feels that we don't have to follow the laws, statutes, and commandments.
One of the things, and at least as far as eating is concerned, I've been in a couple of situations where I have spoken to my family members about eating pork and shellfish and catfish and, whatever. And, they've looked at me like I'm absolutely out of my mind. But if I say it to some Gentiles, then, and I say, and they give me the opportunity to express, because a couple of people have been ill, had cancer, stuff like that, and was talking about how they started eating clean, but they were eating shrimp at the same time. I was like, do you mind if I kind of share some information with you? And that maybe the Most High didn't intend for us to eat thus and such, because He didn't create it to be eaten. He did it for something else. It's still good, but it's not good for what you want it to be good for. And they stop and they go, oh, never thought about it like that. But when you tell your people, oh, please, it's unbelievable. So, because they're so been steeped in Christianity.
I mean, the reality is that you can make really any meat taste good. You really can with the right seasoning, the right. I mean, that don't mean nothing. Just because it tastes good, that means absolutely nothing.
Nothing.
You know.
Oh yeah, we become experts at it because of slavery. They gave us the worst food, and we turned it into, now they love it. Can you make us some pig feet? Can you make us, some this and that? You all cook best. Yeah, because we learned how to create, because we are creators, and so we can make anything taste good.
I got to interject real quick. This came to me. One thing I've noticed that is just disgusting to me. And the thing about it is there's the entire nation that we live in America has created institutions to keep us in bondage and breaking the covenant, okay? But one thing I've seen recently, and I've gone to like different grocery stores and stuff like that, and I've seen like these big old huge paint buckets of chitlins. At the grocery store.
10 pounds hail.
That is absolutely disgusting. And like I'm telling you, go to Walmart, go to Safeway, go to any of the, Kroger or something like that, you're going to see all the pork products out in force.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I've never seen just buckets of chitlins chilling for sale any other time. And they got that stuff out right now.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely disgusting.
Yep, and that's who the main ones, not the only ones buying it. Too. That's who the main ones, if not the only ones buying it.
Man.
Are people.
Now, in regards to, again, chapter 2, one of the key things that stands out to me, and again, I stress this when I teach in regards to the Maccabean period in this part, especially with someone new to the awakening, is the fact that just like Mattatyahu and his family, we all have a choice to make. He literally was forced to make a choice. Are you going to stand for the law and for righteousness and for the ordinances of your Elohim, or are you going to choose to side with the heathen? And, the time came where, the heathen came to his town and was like, what's he going to do? And he had to make a choice. And each and every one of us have made a choice and continue to make a choice for righteousness. But those that are awakening to this truth and hearing this message for the first time, you now have to make a choice. You have to make a decision. Are you going to stand for righteousness and for the righteousness of your ancestors? Or are you going to choose Hasatan and his children and his ways? It's just very sobering. It's very sobering, and I try to compose myself while reading that because I had tears in my eyes when I look at, what they must have felt and what they went through and seeing the state of their people being oppressed and subjugated to such bondage. It's very, very powerful. Anyone else have any comments or statements they want to make about chapter 1 or chapter 2, but specifically chapter 2? All right, going once, going twice.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
You just said something about now that we know who we are and that we have a covenant with the Most High, then we have to it forces us to make a choice. I feel like, and for the first time in my life, I'm confronted. I won't say daily, but at least 2 or 3 times a week, I'm confronted with having to make a choice. And sometimes I don't make the right choice, okay? I'm not going to pretend that I do all the time. But it's a regular thing now. Now that I'm hearing you say that, I'm recognizing that almost daily I have to make a choice. And so, like I said, you're going to make that choice more than once. You're going to make it at least 2 or 3 times a week, at least.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have something to say. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. One point I wanted to bring out, too, is that our bodies are made differently. Even scientifically, it backs it up that when we eat certain things, our bodies respond to it far worse than our counterparts in other nations. Let's take vaccines. The unclean foods, they actually affect us worse than the other nations, which is why, we have so many people. I'm from New Orleans, so I see and have a lot of family members with high blood pressure, high cholesterol, things like that, who eat those same unclean food as some of the other nations, but it affects our bodies differently. So I just wanted to bring that out there.
Good point.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw something like that on Facebook where there were two doctors that were on a show, and they were talking about women specifically. In this particular instance, they were talking about women. But just in overall, they were talking about how our bodies are different from other nations.
So you're saying that it actually affects us more adversely?
Yes.
Compared to other people?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Ah, man, it's just so much stuff. I mean, the reality is that's absolutely it's true. There's vaccines that are designed to specifically target us. There's the food that's been modified to actually, it's harmful to us. I mean, literally, I think don't underestimate the evil that the heathen nations have, their inclinations towards us. They literally, the entire earth in their care has been destroyed. It's been poisoned. Nothing is sacred. Okay, nothing is sacred with these different heathen people. Nothing is sacred. Nothing is holy. And we are enemy number one on this earth. Israel and like y'all hear me say this all the time, Israel has no friends or allies. Gotta keep it 100. It's the truth. Israel has no friends or allies. The entire earth and the population therein, those that are in power, have it out for us. And it's something where, like the call to action that Mattatyahu put towards his children, his sons, that's where we're at right now. Each and every one of you have been given a charge to reach your people in the covenant of the law of your ancestors. Those of you, the different leaders that are in the different assemblies, you are given the charge to steward over the people of Yah in your assemblies. And in your region, speak life to draw them out. Those that are in the Seattle-Tacoma Assembly, they heard my message today about the fact that one of the warnings that I've received in regards to a threat that our people face is that we must get our people out of these churches. They're not safe there. They are not safe in these churches. And bottom line is we have to do our part, stay the course, and to do what we can as directed and led by the Most High to awaken our people, to gather together, and to be about the restoration of our heritage, our covenant, our history, raising up our children in this truth. We have to restore the love between the Hebrew Israelite man and the Hebrew Israelite woman and heal some of those wounds and some of those scars that we've had because of how we've been raised up and taught. You know what I mean? We really have to proudly and loudly proclaim the truth and the truth of who we are. I mean, that's just what it comes down to. We know who we are, and it's time for all to be aware of who we are. Nationwide, worldwide, we got to continue proclaiming the truth of this Torah and walk it out in our daily lives without compromise. Because for me, I look at it, and I don't want to cry and break down, but it's just I'm going to stop. It's just a matter of if there were women, daughters of Zion, that knew the consequences of obeying Torah, and they were going to do righteousness no matter what. They weren't going to compromise. I want to be as strong as those powerful daughters of Zion that were willing to be crucified alive, to have their own infants hung around their necks. I want to be as faithful as them when it comes to my walk. So I'm going to stop right there. But, man, it's sobering. It's sobering to recognize that we had ancestors that were willing to willingly be slaughtered so as not to break Shabbat.
Yep. That's where we need to be.
Yeah,
that's the extent and level of their willingness to sacrifice themselves to say, you know what? This day, Shemayim and Haaretz will be given account of your wickedness this day. Heaven and earth give account of your wickedness this day and slaughtering an innocent people. But I'm also encouraged by the boldness of the Hasmonean family to say, even on the Shabbat, we will fight. We will fight because we have to survive. Because if we don't survive, there will be none righteous left. That's powerful. So with that, it's time to fight. And whichever way the Most High has called and directed you to fight, it's time for us to fight. And as I go into the next chapters tomorrow, we're going to go ahead and get into, like I said, for those that want to fast forward, you can go ahead and fast forward to 1 Maccabees Chapter 4 in regards to the rededication of the temple. But I will be going over that tomorrow sometime. So I'm going to pray about what time I should do it. And I will put out the appropriate messages in advance so that you guys can make time that want to participate, and we'll go from there. But anyone else have any comments they want to make before we close out?
Are these gatherings for the timing of Hanukkah?
Are they for the timing?
Yeah. Like, so in other words, is this on telephone conference for the occasion of Hanukkah or the observance of it?
Yes, not necessarily for the observance of it, but for preparation of it in regards to it. So that there's an understanding of Hanukkah, just to understand the history. So it's just in regards to understanding the history, because most of our people do not know the history. They don't even know where to go to look to find this information out. Many of our people have apocryphas and haven't even cracked it open. So it's an opportunity for those of us to gather and to hear these stories, many for the first time.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And a question: When are you guys following the Hanukkah time period as the Jewish people, or is it a separate time? I mean, I know that it wasn't their history, but they, obviously they parallel everything that we've ever done in history, but.
Right.
In terms of they
had nothing to do with us in regards to Hanukkah. Like you mentioned, they basically just hijacked and overlaid. They basically taken our history and heritage and ran it for themselves. And that's why it's important to look in First Maccabees chapter 4 to see the account where it gives the month and the day, 25th, and that whole breakdown. Now, in regards to the different assemblies, some assemblies are observing it right now according to the full moon calculations, and some are going to be observing it like myself later on. But those that, we follow our ministry, we're not caught up or concerned about the date as long as we are actually observing it at some point in time. Most High will work out the calendar issue at the appointed time. So hopefully that answers your question.
So that, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, statements, or comments? It's greatly appreciated.
Well, just thank you for bringing us together and putting forth the lessons for us and putting it and recording them. This is helpful, especially for those of us who have to navigate the world and sometimes can't chime in and get in live during the call. I appreciate you recording them.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, with that, I will say shalom. It's been a blessing to be with you. I will close out in prayer. Abiyah, peace and shalom, wholeness, rest, illumination of your word as your people rest this night. Bless them as they sleep. Speak to them as they lay down their heads this night. Watch over their household and all that they're stewards over. Give their entire house sweet, sweet sleep. Shalom. And I pray for your continued blessing on our assemblies, the various leaders within the assemblies. These are the assemblies that you've called together out of this earth for a time such as this. Bless them, strengthen them, encourage them, and motivate them with clarity of mind and the direct and clear vision you would have for each and every one of their ministries. Give them wisdom to handle each and every situation that may come their way. May they guide, lead their household in righteousness, holiness, and sanctification. May they have ears to hear continually your word and hear your voice. Speak to them daily. Uplift them in their households. Watch over them. I thank you for this day and this time that we've had to spend together in your word and in the history of our people. Thank you. Thank you. And blessings and all glory, praise, and honor to your name.
Yes.
In the name of above every name, Yeshua HaMashiach. Amen.
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 Amen. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. You guys have a good night. I'll put the information out sometime either tonight or tomorrow. I'll be blessed. Shalom.
All right.
Shalom.
Shalom, family.
Shalom.
Hello, family.